Okay, so today we're going to make spinach and artichoke dip. And this is what you're going to need. You're going to need cream cheese. That is the bread and butter, so to speak, of your dip. You're also going to need onions and garlic. Now, I'm not a big fan of onions, so I cut the recipe in half. But you still need the flavor, and you're going to sweat it out. So I still cut it pretty small because it's a texture thing for me, not a taste thing. So I wouldn't eliminate it completely from the recipe, but cut it how you're going to want it texturally. And you're going to need 1 clove of garlic. Avoid having large pieces of garlic because it can be really potent. So make sure that you have very small pieces that you can sweat out. Okay, you want to have milk, and the higher the fat content, the more flavorful it's going to be. This is 2% milk, but the reason why we have milk is because when we start cooking the cream cheese, since it's a soft cheese, it's going to lose its moisture really fast. So a half a cup of milk is recommended to avoid losing the moisture and getting dry in the cream cheese. Also, you're going to want Parmesan cheese, and don't use the powdered kind of Parmesan cheese because that's not going to be flavorful enough. You want the Parmesan that comes in a triangle from your store, because the least amount that you use, the more flavorful it's going to be, and it's really good. So I recommend getting the triangle type of Parmesan hard cheese from your store. However, if you don't have it, you can use the shaker kind. You're also going to need a hot sauce of your choice, and Worcestershire sauce. We're using canned spinach. The recipe calls for fresh spinach, but it can be hard to keep alive if you don't eat spinach regularly. So this is canned spinach. So if you're not sure you're going to make it anytime soon, you can use canned spinach. If you're going to use fresh spinach, you're going to have to let it wilt down. This is already wilted, so it's going to save us some time as well. These are artichoke hearts. I used 4 artichoke hearts. The recipe does not call for artichoke hearts, but I really like it, which is why we're adding it. Salt and pepper, of course, and then this is mozzarella. This is way too much mozzarella for the recipe, but I really like cheese. My family really likes cheese, and so we're going to use what we like to taste. So if you don't like mozzarella all that much, it's another soft cheese, so it is going to dry out fast, so you have to be aware of that. But make sure that you use how much you're going to like. But the recipe will be from the Pinterest ad that I received this recipe from as well. So let's begin. Okay, so I'm using a regular pot for this. A lot of chefs like to use a Dutch oven or cast iron because you can just pop it right into the oven once when you're done cooking it. A lot of people don't have those around the house, so we're just going to cook it in a regular pot and then transfer it to another pan that can be put into the oven. So first, let's put in our garlic. Garlic's a little bit harder than onion, so we want to get the garlic in first. But since this is olive oil and it's preheated, so you want that sizzle. That's what really brings out the smell too, the aroma. And the onion, and we want it to sweat out. Until they start becoming translucent. We don't want to overcook them to where they're starting to get brown on the outside, because then it's not so much of a sweet flavor, it's more of a hard flavor. So we want to just sweat them, get the flavors out. Okay, if you let them sit in the olive oil, it's more likely to burn. And the more consistent the size of your onion is and pieces of garlic, the more likely it's going to cook evenly. So try to get as similar size as possible. There's a couple of mine that are a little too big, but for the most part, they're about the same size. Okay, so this is about sweated out. So now I'm going to add my spinach. Now, I don't like the canned juices in the spinach, so we rinse this out. But on the bright side, since this is already wilted out, I'm just going to let it combine with the onion and garlic for a minute. And add my artichoke hearts. We're not adding the cheese yet because that's the part that's really difficult. If you add the cheese right at the beginning, it's really hard to keep its moisture. So at this point, you just have your spinach, your garlic, your onion, and your artichoke hearts if you want them. And then we have to let it get back up to temperature because once when you added those ingredients, the temperature went down because they were at room temperature and not already heated on the stove. And also I already have my oven preheated to 425 and I already have olive oil in my pan for transferring. You want to have a little bit of grease or olive oil in there because otherwise it'll stick. So all my flavors are now married together and everything's up to temperature. So now I'm going to add my hot sauce and my Worcestershire sauce. And if you notice, I'm using a wooden spoon, and the reason why I did that, and you can tell I've burned it before, is because if you use metal, it's going to radiate the heat, and you're going to be over this pot a lot. So make sure that you're not using a full metal handle. Okay, so this is about a tablespoon of Worcestershire and about a teaspoon of hot sauce. And it's just for flavor, and it's just to your liking. You don't have to add those in any way. If you like the taste of spinach and artichoke heart, you definitely don't need to add the hot sauce and Worcestershire. And of course, right now it doesn't look fantastic, but it's going to when we add the cheese. Okay, and we'll know when to transfer this when this is completely melted. You can cut it up to speed it up. Some people like to use an immersion blender or just a blender in general, especially since this is going in the oven. They like to heat this up and then use a hand blender to mix it all together and then just put it in the oven. We want to get everything up to temperature. So we're going to melt it down and start adding some milk. So it doesn't lose its moisture. Now, just like I cut down the onion, you can always cut down on the amount of spinach if you're really here for the cheese, not the spinach. But like I said, every time you add an ingredient, especially if it's something like cheese that came out of the refrigerator, the temperature within the pot changes. So you want to let it start getting up to temperature, and once when it does, that's when the cheese really starts losing its moisture. Okay, so the cheese is starting to melt. I'm going to add more of the milk. And every time I add milk, again, we have to get it back up. And the milk amount is an estimate. It's not totally set in stone, so you don't have to use it all, especially if everything's getting up to temperature really fast. Because this isn't cast iron or Dutch oven, because this isn't a Dutch oven or cast iron, it gets up to temperature way faster. Everything's starting to melt. Because this is canned, it doesn't have that white in between. You can't see the leaves, obviously. So this is going to be more of a spinach dish. Now I'm going to start adding the mozzarella. And because this is going in the oven, I'm putting the leftover chunks from the shredding because we don't have to look for the pretty in that. Most of the time I give those to my kids to eat beforehand to snack on. You got to add a little bit more milk. Now you can see it's really cheesy, and that's what we want. At this point, before we transfer it, we're actually going to remove it from heat. Because we like that cheesy. Once when it stops doing that, it's too combined. So once when it's like that, that's good. We like that. We're going to do salt, pepper, and Parmesan. Okay, so you want fresh cracked pepper, and it's always better than the shaker, but you can buy the sets for these for 20 bucks at Target, or you can get temporary ones that they sell at any grocery store. But fresh cracked pepper has way more flavor than the shaker. So now we're going to add our cheese, and remember, since this is freshly grated, it's way more flavorful, but a really good flavor. So I'm using a little hand grater. This is actually a zester. I just can't find my grater. So we're just going to add a little bit, and we're going to mix it in. We still have cheesiness, which is good. That's what we want. Remember, we want to kind of keep it up to temperature because we don't want to shock it going into the oven. And this is totally to taste. You don't have to put a lot. If you're not a big fan of Parmesan or Romano, you don't have to put that much in there, but it does have a really good flavor. I'm going to do that one more time. Okay, and now we're going to transfer it to the oven. Now this is ready to be transferred into the oven, so we're putting it, I'm using a glass pan. Look at all that cheesiness, it's going to be so good. I'm using glass pan, so it's not going to radiate as much heat as a metal pan. So just be aware, if you're using a metal pan, it can radiate more heat, which means that it could get crispier on the sides and can get also overcooked. So I'm trying to spread it evenly in the pan. Okay, and then last, so because we don't want the moisture to escape, we're going to top it with mozzarella. And just a thin layer, you don't need a lot. And it is going to spread. What's nice about mozzarella is it's going to melt, and then it's going to get a little bit crispy, which is that flavor that everybody really likes. And we don't need to do anything else other than put it in the oven. And it's only going to go in for a few minutes because as soon as the cheese melts and gets a little bit of brown on the side, it's done. Okay, so here's the finished product. This is sourdough. You can also eat it with tortilla chips, but I was born on the coast, and so I'm a little bit partial. And then wait until this cools down, but then you just dive right in.